Hi everyone, welcome to the week 11 build book demonstration. Week 11, we're building on the week 10 build book, continuing on looking in a bit more in depth at replication. So when we talk about replication, we're talking about replicating objects between our domain controllers. So we're talking about our Fanco DC1, our Fanco DC2, and replicating with our domain controllers in other sites, so our east and our west. And in order to do replication, there's two ways you can do it. You can use sites and services, which kind of gives you the GUI approach to it. But we're going to explore repadmin and what you can do with the repadmin command as far as replicating partitions for inbound and outbound replication statuses. We're going to replicate single partitions between, an east domain controller over to our secondary Fanco domain controller, so DC2. We're going to look at syncing all partitions and the commands that you can run in order to get that functional as well. We're also going to look at filtering some attribute sets and how you can use that feature, and then do some replication once we've done that. We're also going to look briefly at a read-only domain controller, and we're not actually going to create the actual server that we're going to use. We're just going to create a computer object that's going to be our RODC, and again, look at replication related to that. And then we're going to finish it up with a beginning look at setting up our certificate authority. So we're going to install Active Directory certificate services. We're going to create a certificate authority, so a CA. Look at renewing certificates, and then setting up a online responder using OCSP. And we're going to need this so that when we get into next week, so week 12's build book, there's going to be a certificate that's needed to get Active Directory Federation Services functional, as well as ADRMS, which we will look at to finish off the course. So the only new server that we're introducing in the week 11 build book is this Fanco CA server. And again, that's going to be our certificate. We're not utilizing anything in Acme, so you don't need those servers for this week's build book, but you will need them for the week 12 build book. So to get it started, we're going to look at replication. So just flipping over to our servers. So I have both my Fanco DCs, I have my West DC, my East DC, need the router, and I also created the Fanco CA server. So those are the servers you're going to need for this week. Again, same LAN segments that you're going to use, so make sure you've configured those as well. First thing we want to do, so there's all of this is going to focus on repadmin, so REPADMIN, and various flags that we can add to repadmin to do replication. So on each of our domain controllers, so DC1, DC2, etc., the first thing we want to do is generate our replication topology without having to wait 15 minutes. So we look at the knowledge consistency checker, which is KCC, and that will run every 15 minutes. We're going to speed it up. And what this will do is for each of the domain controllers that we run this on, it forces the DC to immediately recalculate the inbound replication topology. So we go to command prompt. We're going to type in repadmin KCC, and you'll see that it's running the check against Canada East. Do it on DC2. You'll see it's running against Canada West. Over on West DC1, Canada West. And over on East DC1, same thing in Canada East. So to look at the replication partitions for inbound and outbound, before we do the rep admin, I'll just show you over here on sites and services. If you remember back to last week, here's all of our sites that we created. So Canada East and Canada West are what we are using for this week's build book. So under Canada East, you have your servers here. There's our two domain controllers. Same thing with Canada West. We have our domain controllers here as well. If you expand under, so for example, DC1, East DC1, you'll see NTDS settings. And you'll see that it has our server located in there with our connection. If you wanted to use AD sites and services, you can replicate from a selected DC or to a selected DC using the GUI if you wanted to. It's another option. You can also force replication now if you right-click over here as well. So again, the options are in here, but when we want to analyze replication, so inbound and outbound, that's when we need to use the repadmin command. So I'm on Fanco DC1, and what we want to do is analyze the replication results. So I'm going to do repadmin show rpl/repsto, and you'll see that it spits out all kinds of information. So looking at the command, what does the command actually mean? The first part of it, so the show REPL, so show replication, that's going to show us our inbound partners. Then the REPSTO, that shows us our outbound partners. So you're going to see that we're running it against Fanco DC1. And what it will do is it'll tell you each of the partitions and the status of the replication for inbound. So we look at configuration, the schema, domain DNS zones, etc., and it will tell you where it's coming from. So Canada East, DC1, Canada West, Fanco DC1. And it tells you that the replication was successful. Same thing down here with the outbound neighbors for change notifications. You'll see here for configuration, schema, etc., that it's looking at Canada East, Canada West, the other DCs, and that the replication attempt was successful. So you'll know that if any of these come back with an error, it will give you a general idea about what the error is, and it will help you troubleshoot any replication issues there may be. So for example, sometimes there will be DNS issues or connectivity issues between domain controllers, and it will give you errors that you can then look up to see what the actual error means. But let's say we want to just replicate a single partition. So if we look at each of these partitions, so the Fanco, configuration, schema, those are all partitions. We want to replicate one of these, not all of them. So to do that, we're going to replicate from East DC. What we're going to do is we're going to replicate using the repadmin command /replicate, and we're going to do Fanco DC2.fanco.local, and that's our destination. And our source is eastdc1.east.fanco.local. And we're going to replicate the single partition for configuration. So we're going to do cn equals configuration, dc equals Fanco, dc equals local. So what this is saying is we're going to replicate to Fanco DC2 from East DC1, and we just want to sync the configuration partition. So we do that, and it comes back as being successful. If yours comes back with access denied, what you have to do is make sure that you log in as the Forest root administrator account. So in this case, we need to log in as administrator at fanco.com, not the administrator at east.fanco.com. So make sure you do that, and the command should run successfully for you. Now let's say we want to sync all of our partitions. So this is another repadmin command, and it's case sensitive. So it's repadmin APED. So the capital A means replicate all partitions. The capital P will push updates, and this is to all the outward originating from the domain controller in which the command is run on. A /E is it synchronizes to all your sites, and then the D will identify the replication partners by their distinguished names. So, sorry, I missed one part here. Repadmin /sync all, and then /APED. So repadmin sync all APED. We do that, and you'll see that it comes out with all of the replication that has been successfully completed. So now what we want to do is, let's say we made a change to our domain, and we need to replicate that change immediately to all of our domain controllers in the forest. So we want to replicate from the domain controller that's hosting the domain, naming master role as the originating domain controller. So the first thing we want to do is, and you've learned this probably in previous courses, is looking up using the netdom query FSMO. So this is going to pull back all of our FSMO roles, and it will tell us which domain controller is the schema master, the domain naming master, and then the other options here as well. So what we want to do is sync all of our partitions, specifying a domain controller to the originate replication from as well. So to do that, we do repadmin /sync all /APED, and it's going to be to fanco dc1.fanco.local. So when I run that, it comes back, finished all without errors. All without errors, and everything looks good. So you'll see that it is syncing up all of the partitions. So if we look down here, we'll see all the partitions. All the partitions here. And again, that's just a way that we can force it if we needed to make a change immediately. So just a couple repadmin commands to look at. The next part we want to look at is doing a filtered attribute set. So to do this, we're actually going to go over to fanco dc1. And you need to make sure that you're logged in with a domain administrator, enterprise administrator level account, because we're going to run ADSI edit. And this is where you manage your schema. So in ADSI edit, we want to connect to, and under the well-known naming context, we want to specify schema. So we'll hit OK on that. And what we want to look for is CN equals employee dash ID. So there's our employee ID. What you'll see, make it a little bit bigger here, this is under the class, an attribute schema. So think of this as the blueprint for creating attributes of objects when they are created. So what we want to do is open up the properties for employee ID. And we're going to go down to search flags and hit edit. And we're going to add in 640. And the reason for that is that's going to be the flag for our RODC, which is our read-only domain controller filtered flag. And we want that to be set. So we're going to hit apply on that. Oops. Give me that error. So it did add the confidential RODC filtered there as well. And the reason for that is actually because you can't use ADSI to modify the base schema. So if you see here for the schema flag, it's a base object for the schema. So even though you think this would work, it actually does not. So what you have to do is modify your schema using the LDAP tool. So to do that, we need to open up ldp.exe. And we're going to do connection, bind, and we'll hit OK. And then we want to do browse and modify. We're going to leave the DN blank. The attribute entry, though, we want to have schema upgrade in progress. Value is 1. We're going to add that, hit enter, hit run. You'll see that that ran down at the bottom there. So now we're going to go view tree, and our base DN is going to be CN equals schema, CN equals configuration, DC equals Fanco, DC equals local. Hit OK on that, so it should connect over with all of our attributes here on the side now. And again, we're going to find that CN employee ID like we were doing before. And we're going to modify that. The attribute is going to be search flags. Value is what we used before, which was the 640. We want to do a replace because there's already that value that was there. So we're going to hit enter on that. Place search flags, and then hit run. So we'll close that out. You'll see over here that it successfully modified that attribute. So we're going to go back to ADSI. And again, we're going to find that CN equals employee ID. And now you'll see what we tried to do before. There's our value set to 640, confidential RODC filtered. So now what we want to do is we're going to go back to command prompt, and we're going to run that netdom query FSMO. And what we're looking for is which server is our schema master. So it just takes a second for it to run. Comes back, Fanco DC1, our schema master is, so we're going to again do repadmin /sync all pd fanco-dc1.fanco.local. And the reason why I'm picking Fanco DC1 is because that is our schema master. And we'll run through, and it has finished successfully. So a couple, again, additional things you have to do depending on the type of replication you're looking for. There are times where you do need to make schema changes, and there are different ways that you need to go about doing that. So the next thing we want to look at is our read-only domain controller, and looking at some passive replication policies that you can do with a RODC. So instead of us going ahead and creating another domain controller that we're just going to use to test for, we're just going to use a computer object to create our RODC. So we're going to, again, on Fanco DC1, we're going to open up Active Directory users and computers. And under domain controllers, again, make sure you're on fanco.local. You'll see that we have our Fanco DC1, DC2. And what you can do when you right-click on domain controllers, which is an OU, you'll see it says pre-create a read-only domain controller account. So we're going to click on that. It gives you a wizard, and we'll use the currently logged on piece there. Fanco-RODC is the computer name that we're going to give it. It's then going to ask us for what site we want this to be part of. So we're going to add it to Canada East. Give that a second for it to add. Okay, and then we are going to hit next on that. It then wants us to set the delegation for RODC administration. So we're just going to use domain admins for that. And here's our summary. So we're setting up Fanco RODC. It's part of Canada East. It's a read-only domain controller, yes. And we're giving delegation access to domain administrators. So now you'll see that we have a new computer object that's been created. It's a RODC, currently unoccupied domain controller. So what we want to do is create a password replication group. So we're going to open the properties on Fanco RODC, and you'll see up at the top here there's a password replication policy tab. And you'll see it has a bunch of different users, computers, and groups that are located in here. So we want to add to allow passwords. So we hit OK on that, and it's going to be domain users. So we now have domain users here as an allow. Then we want to click on advanced. And you'll see down here, there's the option to pre-populate passwords. So we're going to pre-populate the password. And we're going to add in a test account that I created last time. So it says, do you wish to send the current password for these accounts to this RODC? Hit yes, and that will pre-populate the password. Now, when we hit yes, we're going to get an error, and the reason for that is because it's a computer object. The RODC does not actually exist. So just to give you an example of what should happen there, to make sure things don't get messed up, I'm just going to delete that read-only domain controller. We don't really need to reset any of that information, so we're just going to hit delete, and it will go ahead and delete that RODC. So those are the steps when you are looking to delete your read-only domain controller. So now what we want to look at is setting up our CA role. So we're going to jump over to certificate services. And for this server, we're going to need Fanco CA. So I'm going to log in on this. I then want to add a new role. And the role that I'm going to add is the Active Directory Certificate Services. So we'll hit next on that. And then you get to the options where what type of role services do you want to install. For now, we're only going to add in the Certification Authority role. Confirm that, and it will go ahead and install. So now that is installed. We can hit close on that. And what you'll notice is up at the top here, it wants you to configure the additional post-deployment configuration. So we'll hit next on that. We're going to set it up as a certification authority. It's going to be an enterprise CA. So these are the two options that I talk about in the lecture between enterprise and standalone. It's also going to be a root CA. We'll have to create a new private key because this is our first CA. Just keep all the defaults. 5 years is the default period. We'll leave it at that. And again, keep all the defaults, and then we're going to finalize the configuration. And that will just take a few minutes for it to finish. Okay, so once that's done, you'll see that the configuration succeeded. So now we're going to open up Certification Authority. And as I briefly mentioned there, the default for the CA certificate is only good for 5 years by default. So I'm just going to look at issued, revoked, pending. You'll see that there's not a whole lot in here. So what we're going to do is for our Fanco CA server, we're going to right-click all tasks, and then we're going to renew our CA. So it's going to stop the services, issue the new CA, and it will just take a second for it to finish doing that process. So once it restarts issued certificates, you'll now see that we have our certificates that are issued that we can now use. So we're going to use them by setting up a online responder, and we're going to use OCSP for this. So what we have to do is go back into Server Manager, and we want to add roles and features. And for the Active Directory certificate services, you'll see under here there's online responder. We want to make sure that that is checked off. Hit next. It's going to go through. You'll see that it's installing IAS. It's installing some other features that are part of IAS so that we can configure our online responder. And now that has finished installing. So we're going to hit close on that. Just going to refresh the certification authority here. So what I'm going to do is go to the properties here. So when you open up the properties of your CA, you'll see a bunch of different tabs here. And one of the tabs is extensions. So this is where you select the extension type and you can specify the options. The type of extension we're looking at is a Authority Information Access, so an AIA. And this is where we're going to configure our CA to use our OCSP server. So we're going to enter it as HTTP. Note it's not HTTPS, it's HTTP. Fanco-CA, Fanco-CA/OCSP. And we're going to hit OK on that. So it now shows up in the list there. And down at the bottom here, it's important to note. So we want to include the AIA extension of the issued certificate, so check that off. And we want to include in the online certificate set as protocol, which is OCSP extension. So make sure both of those are checked off. Hit OK, and then restart the services when prompted. So now what we want to do is go down to our certificate templates. And we're going to right click on that and go to Manage. And Windows includes a whole bunch of different certificate templates that you can use. Some of these we're going to leverage next week when it comes to the Active Directory Federation Services setup. But the one we're looking for is the OCSP response signing. And we actually want to go to the properties for that. Go to the Security tab. And for authenticated users, we want to check off enroll and auto enroll. So both of those have to be checked off when you're setting up your online responder. So hit OK on that. And we'll close out of the certificate templates. And now we want to right click on certificate templates, new certificate template to issue. it just takes a second for that to load up as well. And we're looking for that OCSP response signing certificate that we just did, or template that we just configured. So we're going to hit OK on that. It now shows up in our certificate template list. And now we're going to close out of our CA, and we're going to open up our online responder management console there. And we want to look at the replication configuration here. So we're going to add a replication configuration. And we're going to name it the Fanco CA Online Responder. Gives us a bunch of options here. So we want to select a certificate for an existing enterprise CA, because we did configure that. And we're going to do browse. So we're going to select our CA, which is the one here. And then we'll hit next on that. And we want to make sure that we are automatically selecting the sign-in certificate with the auto-enroll. And you'll see the options there for OCSP response signing as well. We'll then go ahead and initialize, which just takes a minute or two. And then we'll hit finish. And what we want to see is down here, it tells us that our online responder is working. So when it comes to showing a screenshot to prove that your online responder is functional on your challenge lab or on your practical test, make sure that you have a screenshot of this page with the online responder configuration showing that it is in a working state. So that is a wrap for the week 11 build book. Next build book is week 12, where we're going to again build on the certificate services and begin looking at Active Directory, Federation Services, and ADRMS as well. But for this week, really good takeaways are the repadmin command. That's really a helpful tool when you're analyzing replication between domain controllers. So, definitely one of those to keep in your toolbox to use in the future.